People see a high-yield savings account headline rate and assume it works like a simple promise. If the page says around 5%, you expect the interest line on your statement to look like 5%. But a lot of accounts are built, so the headline number is not the number you actually earn. Not because you did anything wrong, because the rate can be tiered, capped, time-limited, or conditional, and those details change the math. By the end, you'll be able to do two things. First, you'll be able to compute your real monthly yield from your own statement in about 60 seconds. Second, you'll know 3 signals that tell you whether the rate is stable or a teaser that can fade. This is educational information, not financial advice or a recommendation. Let's make it real with one simple scenario. Maya has about $12,000 set aside for a move and a down payment fund. She wants it safe and accessible, so it sits in a savings account. She sees a high-yield savings account paying around 5% and thinks, that's roughly $50 a month. She moves the money, waits a statement cycle, and the interest line shows something closer to 15. It feels like a bait and switch. Most of the time, it isn't a scam. It's the structure. Start with the detail almost everyone skips. Interest is usually earned day by day, based on your daily balance, then credited on your statement date. The advertised number is an annual percentage yield, which is an annualized figure that assumes you qualify for the rate on the money you keep there. So, here's the fast test to see what you actually earned. On your statement, find your average balance for the period and the interest paid for the period. If you earned $40 on an average balance of $10,000, that's about 0.4% for the month. Multiply by 12 and you're roughly at 4.8% annualized. If you earn $12 on $10,000, that's about 0.12% for the month. Multiply by 12 and you're around 1.4% annualized. Once you've done that, you're not arguing with marketing. You're looking at your real effective rate. If the effective rate is lower than expected, there are 4 common reasons, and each one leaves a fingerprint you can check. 1 is tiering. The top rate only applies to a slice of your balance, and anything above that earns much less. 2 is a balance cap, which is tiering with a different name. The top rate applies up to a certain amount, then drops above it. 3 is timing. Promotional rates can be limited to a few months, and they can start mid-cycle. Because interest is earned daily, a partial month at the high rate can look weak on the first statement. 4 is conditions. Some banks require direct deposit, a minimum number of transactions, or other monthly activity. Miss the condition and you earn the base rate instead. Here's the intermediate insight that matters. The rate you care about is your effective rate on the dollars you actually keep there, with the behavior you realistically maintain. That's why the statement math beats the headline. Back to Maya. She moved $12,000 on the 10th of the month. For 9 days, the balance was 0. If the account also pays the top rate only on the first $3,000, her blended interest will land way below the headline, even if the ad is technically true. So the first move is diagnosis, not panic. Compute your effective annualized rate. Here's a quick worked example so you can hear the math. Say your average balance was $8,000 and the statement shows you earned $24. 24 divided by 8,000 is 0.03. That's about 0.3% for the month. Annualized, that's about 3.6%. If the ad said 5%, you now know you're earning about 1.5 points less than the headline. That gap almost always comes from one of 2 places. Either only part of your balance qualified, or you did not qualify at all for the bonus rate. The fastest way to tell which is happening is to look for a second rate on the disclosure. If you see a base rate plus a bonus rate, your job is to confirm what triggers the bonus. If you see a high rate up to a cap, your job is to check whether your balance sits above the cap. If it does, your money is blended, and the blended rate is what you should plan around. Also, watch the calendar. If you move money in the middle of the month, your average balance can be much lower than your ending balance. That alone can make the interest line look small on the first statement, even when the rate is fine. Then open the bank's rate disclosure page and look for 3 phrases: up to, on balance is up to, and requirements. Those words tell you whether the top rate is universal or conditional. Now, even if the current rate is real, you still want to know if it's stable. Banks adjust savings rates on their own schedule. Some move quickly, some lag. Some use a big rate as a growth lever, then fade it once they have enough deposits. So, you want 3 concrete signals you can check without guessing. Signal 1 is your effective rate from the statement. month after month. Where to look is the interest paid line and the average balance line. What direction matters is a noticeable drop when your balance and timing stayed similar. Timing-wise, you'll see it within one statement cycle, and sometimes sooner if the bank changes rates mid-month. Signal 2 is the effective date on the bank's rate disclosure. Where to look is the rate table for your exact account. What direction matters is frequent date updates, or the top rate moving behind new customer language. Timing-wise, this can change immediately, and your next statement reflects it. Signal 3 is whether you are actually meeting the qualifying rules, if there are any. Where to look is your account settings and monthly activity summary, especially direct deposit status and required transactions. What direction matters is falling short even once, because some banks reset you to the base rate for the whole period. Timing-wise, this hits at the month boundary, so a miss late in the month can undo the month. Now, once you know what's happening, you get to options. Option 1 is the simplest. Do nothing but plan around your effective rate, not the headline. That's best if the gap is small, your cash sits there for safety, and you value convenience more than optimizing. Option 2 is to restructure your cash so you actually qualify for the top tier. This is not a directive, it's a general mechanism option. If the account pays the best rate only on the first 3,000 and you have 12,000, you can think of your money as two piles. A high rate pile up to the cap and a low rate pile above the cap. The trade-off is complexity. Splitting cash across accounts can make tracking harder and can increase the chance you miss a condition. Option 3 is to avoid condition-based rates entirely and choose a simpler structure, even if the headline number is slightly lower. The trade-off is obvious. You may earn a bit less in the best months, but you reduce the odds of accidentally earning almost nothing for a month because you missed a rule. Option 4 is to accept that cash rates are a moving target and build a rule for when you revisit. For example, if your effective annualized rate drops by more than 1 percentage point, while your balance and timing stayed similar, that's a signal to recheck the disclosure and rerun your math. That's a decision rule based on your own data, not on headlines. Let's revisit Maya with those options, so this stays realistic. Her first month looked terrible because she moved money mid-cycle, and only the first 3,000 qualified for the top rate. When she computed the effective rate, it came out around 1.5% annualized. That tells her the problem is structural, not a one-off statement glitch. Her choice is either to accept that this account only pays well on a small slice, or to redesign her cash piles so the money that needs to be liquid still sits where it earns a competitive rate. Here's the part people miss. A high-yield account is not just a rate. It's a system with failure points. Every failure point has a cost. If the rate is capped, the cost is that your extra dollars earn less than you think. If the rate is conditional, the cost is that your real rate depends on behavior, and behavior is easy to break during a busy month. If the rate is promotional, the cost is that you might build your budget around a number that expires. Now, let's talk about a very common teaser pattern without naming any specific bank. The headline rate is high, but the base rate is tiny. The bonus rate requires direct deposit, a minimum balance, and sometimes a number of debit transactions. The moment you miss one, you don't just lose a little yield. You can lose almost all of it for that cycle. That's why the statement-based effective rate is your reality check. Now, I want to give you a simple 2-minute checklist you can run today. No spreadsheets, no fancy tools, just a few screens. First, open your last statement. Find the interest paid for the period. Find your average daily balance or average balance. Divide interest by average balance to get your monthly rate, then multiply by 12 to annualize. You don't need perfect precision. You need a sanity check. Second, go to the rate disclosure for your exact account. Look for the phrases up to, balances up to, and requirements. If you see tiers, write down the cap for the top tier. If you see requirements, list the ones that could be easy to miss, like direct deposit amount or number of transactions. Third, check your own activity for the month. If direct deposit is required, confirm it posted. If transactions are required, confirm you hit them. If minimums are required, check your lowest balance during the month, not just your ending balance. Fourth, check the rate disclosure effective date. If it changes frequently, assume the rate can move quickly, and plan your expectations with a bit of caution. Fifth, set your 3 signals. Signal 1 is your effective rate on each statement. Signal 2 is the disclosure effective date and the posted rate. Signal 3 is your qualification status for any requirements. If you do those 5 things, you will always know whether your yield is real, blended, or conditional. And more important, you'll know what part of the system is causing the gap. One last intermediate insight before we wrap. When rates eventually drift down, the pain often shows up with a lag because your statement is backward looking. So, if you're watching your interest line, you're watching what happened last month. That's fine. Just pair it with the disclosure date so you don't get surprised by a mid-month cut that only shows up after the cycle closes. For Maya, this turns her from confused into in control. She can tell whether the account is actually paying what she thinks, and if not, she can decide whether convenience, simplicity, or yield matters most for her move fund. And that's the real win, not chasing the highest headline number, but understanding the mechanism well enough to predict your own result. If this helped, subscribe to the Wealth Blueprint for more clear money breakdowns. And leave a comment with the next topic you want covered, or the one part of today's video you want explained even simpler.